this video, we're going to continue to talk about solving equations using angle relationships. So in this picture, we have two lines, M and N, that are parallel, and they're cut by this transversal T. And that's made 8 little angles here for us to look at, and they've labeled 2 of these angles. And the question says, given that the two lines are parallel, find the value of x. So when we do problems like this, we have to decide either these two angles are equal to each other, or the two angles add up to 180 degrees. So think back to that vocabulary we learned. There's a vocabulary term for these two angle spots. They're both in the same group, or they're both in the same spot, but in different groups. So these two angles are corresponding. And corresponding angles are always congruent. That means that they are equal to each other. So 2x plus 9 is equal to 7x plus 24. So the other option here was that the two angles add up to 180 degrees. They're both acute angles, so there's no way that two acute angles could add up to 180 degrees. So that's why I was pretty confident that these two angles are equal to each other. So how do we solve this equation? Well, we have variables on both sides. If you have variables on both sides, you should do everything you can to get all the variables onto one side. Because once all the variables are on one side, then you can work on getting everything away from the variable to find out what the variable is equal to. So in this question, we want to get x all by itself. And to do that, let's first move all the variables to one side. Now, I'm going to move this 2x to the other side using inverse operations by doing minus 2x. And what that will do is it'll put all the variables over here on one side. Look at that. 7x minus 2x is 5x. There's no more variables in the problem. They're all right here on this side. Now, why did I move the 2x and not the 7x? When I do these, I recommend you move the lower coefficient variable. So if I have a choice between moving the 2 and the 7, I'm always going to move the lower one. Because by doing that, you're going to end up with no negatives in your problem, or less negatives in your problem. Right? If I would have done minus 7x, then I would have done 2 minus 7, which is negative 5. You'll still get the same answer. It's just by doing it this way, I avoided negatives. So now let's continue here. How do we solve this? We're going to do minus 24, and we're going to get 5x equals 9 minus 24 is, oops, I did 9 times 24. 9 minus 24 is negative 15. And then the last step is to divide by 5. And we're going to get x equals negative 3. So, one more example for you. Same kind of picture. Two lines are parallel. They gave us two angles. They gave us this angle and this angle. So, again, we need to decide, to find the value of x, we need to decide how are these two angles related. So if I label this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 4 angles in this picture that are congruent to one another. And then there's 4 other angles in this picture that are congruent to each other. So I think we can all agree that 1 and 4 are congruent because they're vertical. 5 and 8 are congruent because they're vertical. 7 and 6 are congruent because they're vertical. And 3 and 2 are congruent because they're vertical. So far we haven't found a reason why 2 and 5 are congruent. 2 and 5 are congruent because they're corresponding angles. Same with 2 and 6. Same with 1 and 5. Same with 3 and 7. And same with 4 and 8. Still, we haven't found a reason why 2 and 5 are congruent. 2 and 7 are congruent because they are alternate exterior. Same with 1 and 8. They are alternate exterior. They are congruent. 3 and 6 are congruent because they're alternate interior. And 4 and 5 are congruent because they're alternate interior. So I've just listed every reason why these two angles could be congruent, and yet I never found a reason why they're congruent. So these two angles are not congruent. These two angles add up to 180 degrees. And if you look at it, this angle 2 is obtuse, and this angle 5 is acute, right? So these two angles, we have one acute and one obtuse. These two angles add up to 180 degrees, right? If 2 and 6 are the same, then 5 and 6 would give you a better visual here of why 5 and 2 add up to 180. Look at if these two add up to 180, well, this one's the same as this one, so I could just move this down here, 7x minus 1. Now we have a better visual of why these two angles add up to 180. So let's solve this question. 5x minus 23 plus 7x minus 1 equals 180. Let's combine like terms. 5x plus 7x is 12x. Negative 23 minus 1 is negative 24. And that still adds up to 180. Let's use it inverse operations. Plus 24. We have 12x equals 204. Let's divide both sides by 12. 204 divided by 12 is 17. So x in this problem is equal to 17.